All right, on this story, we were also hoping to speak to the ANC spokesperson, Pule Mabe. We were hoping that we might still be able to speak to him. But this week we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa and the country's Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu in a tit-for-tat spat over whether she apologised for a controversial opinion piece on the judiciary after a statement from the Presidency which purported that she apologised and retracted her views. Sisulu issued a statement saying that she never committed to retracting or apologising since she stands by what she penned. Let's talk more a bit about this now. Political analyst Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast and Asanda Ngoesheng join me now. A very good evening to you both. In fact, it's still afternoon. Thanks indeed for joining us. Dr. Breakfast, let me start with you. I was reading your piece in one of the papers today where you say the nuances and the complexities that Minister Sisulu raised should be appreciated. Are you saying she raises these points without any insult to the judiciary?
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to applaud the minister for a good job well done by starting a debate of this nature, also by exposing us to a different paradigm. The rationale behind the piece was about the subversion of the Western thought, aimed at exposing the binaries between the colonizer and the colonized, aimed at exposing the binaries between the powerful and the powerless, aimed at exposing the binaries between the oppressor and the oppressed. And in that piece, she makes a very important point that we omit, which is the fact that what we have seen post-1994 has been political co-option and political assimilation for purposes of political conformity. Now, that is a very important point. And she makes reference again to triple BE as a vehicle through which that is done. Now, we cannot dispute the fact that what has happened post-1994 has been the emergence of a tiny minority of the black political elite associated with the ruling party as the main beneficiaries of the fruits of democracy. Hence, I'm arguing that we need to explore what she says. On the other hand, I also think that in the bigger scheme of things also is the upcoming conference of the ANC. So I also think that maybe she's being opportunistic by taking advantage of some of the weaknesses.
Dr. Breakfast, I just want to come in there. Apologies. I would agree with the sentiment which you are sharing about her raising valid points about what South Africans, I guess, are concerned about so many years into democracy. Are you saying that there had been no better way to address that? Do you agree in the manner in which she addressed the issues pertaining to the top echelons within the judiciary? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. The fact that she is a minister doesn't mean that she cannot enjoy the same privileges that are accorded to other citizens. The Constitution makes a provision, for people to express their opinions, and the same goes to all those ministers. So I think this is a golden opportunity for us as a country to take stock of what has happened since 1994 and re-examine the way things are. So I think it's really unfortunate that some people took offense to what she did.
Ms. Asanda, would you agree with that, with what Dr. Breakfast is saying? Others also of the opinion that this was a show of unprecedented defiance from a minister to their own president. Your thoughts?
I think that I disagree completely with a lot of what Dr. Breakfast is saying. First of all, the South African Constitution, she's not the first person to start a debate or conversation about it. If people are interested in unpacking critique of the South African Constitution, there's a guy by the name of Joel Mudiri at the University of Pretoria and he has written a lot about how the South African Constitution did not do enough to take into consideration the legacy of apartheid and the legacy of colonialism. And now if you look at also one of the critical tenets of the Constitution, which is the law around private property and the ownership of private property, it's very clear, even to a person who hasn't studied law, that there wasn't consideration for the fact that the land on which many people have homes, on which many people own, was stolen, and there has never been a process to give that land back. And so it's not as if this is the first time this conversation is taking place. Legal scholars of serious, credentials have been having this conversation, and it's a conversation that I think South Africans have been having. So why would Lindiwe Sisulu at this particular moment take it upon herself to start having these conversations? It's because she's being an opportunist, right? And that is the only reason, because Lindiwe Sisulu has presided over most of the African National Congress's rule of South Africa, which means she has had the opportunity to influence any corrections, any legal updates, any engagement on the Constitution, both at the level of the African National Congress's NEC, and as well as in her capacity as a minister in various different positions. She has held positions like the housing department at some stage, where she had potential to make changes that would lead to South Africans having less of issues around homelessness and shortages of housing. And she never did anything about that. She's been part of international relations, and she has had the opportunity to shift some of these laws, and she has done nothing. And I think that it's really disingenuous for us to now say that she has freedom of speech when we know that there is a clear separation of powers in terms of democracy. And as a result of that, people who are members of cabinet should not be making or starting conversations about, what the judiciary should or shouldn't be doing.
Ms. Asanda, if I could just come in there, please. Both of you, Dr. Breakfast and yourself, mention one word of opportunism. Are we likely to see the spat deepen? And does it point to what the ANC succession scramble will look like?
Yes, of course, we're going to see this. This is, of course, this is usual ANC politics. This is what they do. They pick a topic that is, at the top of the minds of people who've just come out of conversations about land, which also were conversations about the Constitution, by the way. So it's not a new thing, and it's not a thing that hasn't happened in a while. We came out of those discussions, and now she's thinking, I need to make sure that I'm front and center. And sadly, whoever is leading her campaign for the presidency somehow misguided her into thinking that this is the correct way to go. It's not the correct way to go. She is part of the man, if you want to talk about institutionalized capitalism, if you want to talk about, the elite, the political elite of South Africa. She is such a political elite that not only has she been a member of the government and a member of the NEC for almost 30 years, she also is a member of the political elite family of the Sisulus. And so she cannot now pretend to be an ordinary South African who has had no potential or power for influence on the Constitution, on the tenets of the Constitution. In 1996, she was there together with her comrades pulling this very Constitution together. So she cannot come and have this debate or want to have this debate as if she's somebody coming off the street. And that is where I have serious issues with her. And I think she was very irresponsible, considering that we're coming out of COVID and we are barely managing our economy and are barely managing to be seen to be a reputable country that we once were.
Ms. Asanda, I want to bring in Dr. Breakfast. Dr. Breakfast, you agreeing with the sentiments shared by Minister Sisulu? I see some reports about perhaps, I'll ask Pule Mabe in the next few moments whether this is true or not, some calls that perhaps she should face some action. That's according to some reports already out in the public domain, calls by some members of the party's National Executive Committee. Should she be disciplined?
Of course not. I'll tell you why. Because the relationship between the minister and the president is not a relationship of the employer and the employee. The minister did not apply to be a minister. So I don't think that there was an element of respect. You know, I think that the minister should be given her space to propagate her views, because the piece that she wrote in the beginning is a breath of fresh air, because there has been a circulated narrative through the media that is meant to influence people in a particular line of thinking, that our democracy is doing well, blah, blah, blah. So I think the article, what it does is to expose us to another line of thinking. Hence, I'm arguing that we should embrace that. But at the same time, I agree with Asanda that there are elements of, taking advantage of the situation.
All right, let's bring in the spokesperson of the ANC now. Thank you very much for joining us, political analysts there. Joining us, Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast and Asanda Ngoesheng. Thanks indeed for your time. Let's go to Pule Mabe now. The ANC, of course, a two-day Lekgotla currently underway virtually. The meeting follows the party's National Executive Committee meeting, which took place on Thursday and Friday. So the Lekgotla will reflect on service delivery, unemployment and economic recovery, amongst other issues, at the back of the ANC's January 8th statement. So while officials, of course, are gathering virtually, there's still much talk around the exchange between the Presidency and the Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu over her recent article. Let's talk to Pule Mabe now. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Mabe, on the program here on SABC News. Top of the agenda, service delivery, unemployment, some of the things South Africans are concerned about. Are those key priorities for the year ahead?
Yes, of course, Crisilda. Evening and evening to your viewers. We did have the National Executive Committee, the first ordinary National Executive Committee of the African National Congress since we celebrated our 110th anniversary. We had reflected on a number of topical issues, including development in the country. Most importantly, we did reflect on the recently held local government elections, dealt with issues that might have been a challenge that saw the ANC performing in the manner that it did. We took stock of the new lessons learned out of that, and were able to then say, these are the things that we need to be doing going forward. We also had reflected on the situation of our staff. We had spoken about a number of issues that are out there in the public. Of course, we're also planning for this Lekgotla, which is really a platform that allows us to also review the work of government as it relates to the implementation of our own 2019 manifesto. We made a number of promises to our people in terms of how we're going to make their lives better. Of course, we are focused. We have divided ourselves now into different commissions, one dealing with economic recovery and reconstruction, as well as the provision of basic services to all citizens, and building a social compact around unemployment and poverty.
All right.
Defending the gains of our constitution and democratic South Africa, an effective and credible developmental state with focus on local government, and working for the African agenda in the better world. All
Mr. Mabe, while you do this,
govern and guide the work that we are doing in government as the governing party in South Africa.
Yeah, while you do this, there's also been a very public spat between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Minister Lindiwe Sisulu. Will you be discussing this issue?
Well, the African National Congress will never convene a meeting to discuss utterances made by its individual members out in the public. Of course, it can reflect if those positions are in conflict with positions that the movement will have pronounced itself on previously. When the NEC, all cadres that were there would have robustly raised their own issues. We even took a decision that because the issues that we dealt with in the NEC are almost similar with what we were attending to in the Lekgotla, we had said that we will issue one consolidated statement at the end of the Lekgotla, which then reflects on the decisions of the National Executive Committee, but also then deals with some of the programmatic interventions that the movement would have really adopted coming out of the Lekgotla. I can tell you now, it's quite a robust Lekgotla. We are all focused, one, on dealing with the question of unemployment, addressing growing levels of poverty in our country, but also dealing with the elephant in the room of inequality.
Mr. Mabe, but what is the ANC's take on what has transpired between the two this week? Because the ANC has previously come and said that, you know, the judiciary itself should be allowed to do its work. And this now, from what we're seeing, the tit-for-tat that we saw between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Minister Sisulu seemed to be very much about that discontent that the presidency says it was unhappy with the remarks that were made by Minister Sisulu. What's the ANC stance on that?
Well, the ANC has already pronounced itself on matters that deal with the judiciary. We support the independence of the judiciary. We have actually come out to even encourage our members that where they have got views, the organization has got sufficient platforms to allow every member, regardless of their standing and stature in the organization, to use appropriate platforms of organization to be able to ventilate on those. It could be that as they raise these issues, they also work or serve to enrich how we engage as the organization. Seeing that we are even working or planning towards our public policy conference and ultimately that seminal occasion of the 55th National Conference of the ANC, which is expected to take place this December. I mean, conferences of the ANC, by their very nature, are festivals of ideas.
Yeah.
And we always encourage our members and individual leaders to use those platforms, including platforms leading up to those conferences, to be able to express themselves and enrich how the organization does their work. What we are not going to be doing really, Cristilda, is to feed into a media narrative that suggests a spat. We do not believe that there was a public spat. We know that.
But it was a tit-for-tat, Mr. Mabe. You can't shy away from that. It was a tit-for-tat between the ANC president and a very high-ranking minister, Lindiwe Sisulu.
I'm going to leave the media to make its own interpretation of what would have happened out there.
There are some reports, Mr. Mabe. Some reports on calls by some ANC NEC officials for the minister to be disciplined. Has that come up as well?
No. If you have got people in the NEC who whisper things to you, it is not my job as the national spokesperson of the ANC to come and validate whispers. I don't do that. My job really is to communicate that which the organization has taken. There is no way that a self-respecting organization like the African National Congress will spend 2 days discussing an individual NEC member. We've got a lot of things. The people of South Africa are looking for jobs. We have suffered a lot.
But I'm sure you would agree with me, Mr. Pool. I'm sure you would agree with me, Mr. Mabe, that the reflection that it gives to ordinary South Africans, this is the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and a very high-ranking Minister Lindiwe Sisulu in a public tit-for-tat. Statements in the middle of the night, one denying that there was an apology, one saying that there was an apology over an attack on the judiciary.
Well, I'm not a spokesperson in government. I don't speak for government departments. The statements you are referring to seems to be coming somewhere from offices of the state. I'm not in the state. You are welcome to invite spokespersons of government to come and speak for that. I speak for the ANC, and our message is simple. We call on all our deployees in government at all times to present and canvass or drive forward messages that show our people that we are one organization, exist as one, and lead as one, even in government. That has always been what the ANC has come out to reiterate all the time. Now, fast forward to the issues that are being dealt with at the Lekgotla. Because somebody sitting out in Zingin Venda, or somebody sitting out in Palabora, out in Limpopo, or somebody sitting in Botshabelo, or somebody sitting in Randfontein, what they want to hear us say is that these are the programs and interventions that we are going to foster to be able to resolve the situation that they are finding themselves in. One of unemployment, one of inequality, and all of that, and all the other things that are really a concern to our people. So as the African National Congress, we have taken a decision that at all times we'll make sure that when we speak to yourselves in the media, what we drive out there is messages that assure matriculants who have just emerged from these examinations, who have just received their results, that the South Africa that we are going to grow up in is one where opportunities will be available for them to be able to unleash the best of their potential.
ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe, thank you very much indeed. While you do that, I'm sure we can't shy away as well from some of the utterances that have been taking place over this past week. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on the program.